Hello, everybody. It's Mari-Lyn Harris here of Hard at Work, and we're here. I'm here actually with Brian Biro. Biro is how you pronounce it.
That's right.
And I should have asked you first. Anyway, welcome, Brian, and welcome everybody to a little conversation. Brian and I are going to have a little conversation about the Kindness Conference that's coming up at the end of January, and we're going to talk about um, things that he's going to talk about or why he wants to be in the conference, and we're going to continue on from there. So welcome. Thank you for joining us, and welcome, Brian. You want to tell a
Well,
little bit about yourself and, go from there.
thank you, Mary Lynn, and
Introduce
I
yourself.
appreciate the fact that you're putting this whole conference together about something that I think has always been vital, but maybe never so much as right now, and that is the focus on kindness. And it's really the way out of the woods, the way to everybody right now is hoping for a new year, a new you, a new life, a new prospects, new possibilities, rather than so much limits. So I'm excited. A little bit of background.
Mhm.
I always sign all of my emails the same way. It says Brian Biro, husband, father, grandfather,
Right.
speaker, author. So I want to keep that perspective there always. But I've had a grand time. I've been a professional speaker for the last 30 years. I've had three different really neat careers. My first career, I was a United States swimming coach. So I
Okay.
got to work with young people to bring out the potential. Then I went in the corporate world, ended up having a lot of good fortune there, became a vice president of a couple of very large companies.
Mhm.
And now for 30 years doing this work I love as a speaker and an author. And it's really what I was put on earth to do. And
Mhm.
though I'm speaking to corporations, it's really about each person as the CEO of their own life. And that's really what I've
Right.
been doing for 30 years. And I guess right now it's getting to be 31. So I started when I was 2.5. So it's great. Yeah.
That's great, Brian. No, I agree with you about the CEO of each of our own lives. We're all CEOs. I call them. We're all chief energizing officers in our own life.
I
And
love
so
that.
so why not take that concept and run with that? And rather than just, okay, we all play different roles in work and life and everything, but we are in charge of our own life. So,
That's right. Life is about choices, and that's
right.
really what the work is. And one of the key choices is about kindness.
Mm-hmm.
And it's sometimes an easy choice. When people are kind to you, it's easy and natural to be kind back.
Right.
But it's also a more difficult choice when people are not so nice, or when people are scared, or people are not in the best place. And that's where kindness becomes even more important, to be able to
Right.
disagree without being disagreeable.
Right.
We lost a lot of sight of that over at least the last 4 years for sure. But
Mm-hmm.
it's time to get that back, because that's the only way we can really learn from each other, is when we have the kindness to work with people and talk with people and listen to people who may have differing ideas than we do.
Right. Right. And I think that's a big challenge too, because, because of the landscape as it is right now. I'm choosing my words carefully here because the landscape that we are in right now, some conversations are very difficult and challenging, and trying to find a way just to say, look, I don't want to talk about this right now, or can we do it later? And trying to still be respectful of the other person, to listen to them, but sometimes it just gets overwhelming.
Well, it
Certainly
really
on
does.
my
And it's all about perspective.
right.
I had two friends who, when they retired, one was 69, the other was 73, and they rode their bicycles across America.
Oh,
So when
okay.
they retired, they had this plan. It took them 91 days. They had a blast. But I asked them both separately, because I didn't
Right.
want them to
Yes.
interact, to, kind of play off of each other, just to find out what they really thought. I said, what was the best part? What had the most meaning for you in this trip? And I expected him to say things like, oh, I just felt so alive, or I felt like the beauty over the Rockies, or whatever. Well,
Yeah.
but they both said independently, it gets at the core of why kindness can lead us out of this separation.
Mm-hmm.
They said it rekindled their faith in humanity.
Wow.
That's what it did, because as they rode across the country, they were so supported by all different kinds of people,
Right.
people in cities, people in rural areas, people who undoubtedly had totally different political views. But
Right.
that didn't matter at the core level. You know, we
Right.
really are one. And so how do you unlock that? How do we change this crazy
Yeah.
dynamic of separation? Starts one at a time. And that's
Mhm.
really what I think your conference is getting to, that we can do this. We can do it one
Right.
person at a time. And that better part of us that they both said refueled my belief in humanity, that is at the core of that, is really starting to be kind to one another again.
Right. Right. And Brian, what do you suggest that we start doing individually?
Well, the first thing is, you know, we talked about the CEO. I love your chief
Right.
energizing officer. One of the things that I will talk about in my presentation at the conference is how do you really take that responsibility to become someone who is an example of kindness, someone who spreads kindness, someone who ignites kindness. And
Right.
since this is somewhat of a, you know, the title is the ROI of kindness, which
Yeah.
incidentally is the title of my book, which is
Right.
kind of an amazing coincidence.
Yeah.
Um, it
Not a
starts
coincidence.
yeah, it starts with each person accepting a role that you don't have to get promoted into. You can choose it right now, since we talked
Right.
about choices. And I call that the CKO, which is the Chief Kindness Officer.
Okay.
So you can immediately go to the corner suite by being the CKO. But here, so what it really comes down to within an organization, number one is for the organization to create what I call a kindness value proposition. That is
Right.
something that sets a light that says we're going to emphasize, we're going to exemplify
Mm-hmm.
kindness that that dominates not only to our customers but to each other.
Right.
Every great company knows the secret of kindness, because a lot of people think that business and kindness are like
What?
are counter
Yeah.
to one another.
Right. Oil
And
and water.
if you really do the research, which this book did, it's exactly the opposite. It's
Right.
those that understand the secret of kindness. So it starts on a macro level of creating a kindness value proposition. Then it's that stepping into that role of CKOs, Chief Kindness Officer. And how do you do that? That's what I'm really going to talk about. And I call it the 7 habits of a truly effective
Right.
CKO.
Right.
One is probably the most unthought of when it comes to kindness.
Mm-hmm.
It's the most, I've been speaking on leadership and team building for 30 years, and rarely ever have I heard anyone even use this word. But one of the keys to kindness is humility, is
Yeah.
being humble.
Yeah.
Now, again, just as many people have a context and think that, oh, kindness, business is dog eat dog. You can't be a nice person and be successful in business.
Yeah.
Just as that is a fallacy and completely 100% wrong.
Right.
A lot of people have the same kind of feeling about humility, that being humble is somehow weak, or being humble
Yeah.
is somehow makes you less. But being humble doesn't mean you can't be confident.
Mm-hmm.
Um, some of the people I've admired the most in my life personally and in
Mm-hmm.
history: Gandhi, Jesus, John Wooden, who wrote the foreword to my first book, who was the greatest college coach of all time. Incredibly humble, because being humble doesn't mean you think less of yourself.
Right.
You think of yourself less.
Mm-hmm.
But the reason why humility is so key to being a CKO, Chief Kindness Officer, and to your development and the way you work with people is only those who are humble are
Mm-hmm.
lifelong learners.
Mm-hmm.
Only those who are humble would much rather admit that they made a mistake, that
Right.
they didn't do it well, than
Mm-hmm.
have to be right. And
Right.
until you get that focus, see, being a CKO is to move from ego to we go. And the
Right.
only way that can happen starts with the foundation of being humble, which says, every day I want to get better. Every
Right.
day I want to learn from what I did today, so tomorrow I can do things I didn't do yesterday. And if
Right.
we adopted that, it's not weak, it's strength. It's
Mm-hmm.
it's really, really where we go. Gandhi said, a lot of people really talk about the need for consistency. And I would agree with that when it comes to consistency of attitude.
Right.
But Gandhi often said, I don't want to be consistent. If I learn a truth today that's better than the one I learned yesterday, I don't want to be stuck on the one I learned yesterday, because today's is better.
Right.
That's humility.
Right. Right. Yeah, I think what you're saying is that, if you have your strength in learning all the time, learning something different every time, sitting down and having a heart-to-heart conversation with somebody and still learning from them, and just embrace, well, okay, I didn't do that so well. I apologize for that. But, I keep going for that, right? But
Absolutely.
But we also have to be willing to, when you're in a situation where it's difficult and you reach out for help, you have to be willing to help that person. And that's part of the kindness part of it too, right?
It
You have
absolutely
to,
is. It's both being willing to ask
yeah,
for help
yeah,
and being willing to say it, to step up and say, how can I help you?
right.
You brought up a really, in the way you just described how the movement towards kindness, you brought up another one of the 7 habits of a CKO, which is to ask more than tell.
Right,
How can you serve someone? How can you be truly kind to someone if you don't know what's important to them?
right,
And how can you know what's important to someone if you don't recognize you have 2 ears, 1 mouth? It's a clue. All
right.
right. So
Yeah,
start by listening, asking, become a master asker.
right.
When you ask questions of somebody, you fuel something, you ignite something that is called the reticular activating system. All right. And that is a part of your brain that essentially is the brain spam filter. In the same way that your email gets
Yeah.
filtered out spam, we have the same device in our brains called the reticular activating system, which it's too much for me to remember. So I call it the RAS. All right. And
Okay.
so right now, we're going to learn how to get our RAS in gear. All right. Your RAS is that spam filter. And what it does is it sorts through stimuli.
Hmm.
There's so much stimuli, even right now,
Right,
that if we didn't have some effective mechanism to block out most of that from getting through, we'd be in sensory overload.
right.
So the RAS lets in 2 things. It lets in what's of value to you
Hmm.
and what's a threat.
Hmm.
And it basically blocks everything else out. So when you become a master asker and you ask people, what's the best team you've ever been a part of?
Right.
Why was that what made that such a great team? When you ask people, what are your greatest dreams and goals for the year? Who is the kindest person that you've ever met? And what did they mean to you? And you
Hmm.
ask those kinds of questions, and then you do that magical thing called listen,
Yeah.
because think about it. What is the most underused sense? I, I think
Hearing,
it's, I think
listening.
it's listening,
Yeah.
because when we're talking, we're thinking, when we're supposedly listening, we're formulating our response before we
Right.
really listen. But when you listen to those kinds of questions and you really take it in, your ass is in gear. And
Hmm.
so you'll be walking through a store and you'll say, I talked to Mari-Lyn about what really matters to her. And it'll feel like somebody grabs your head, turns it over, points you to a book that the book was always there. You
Hmm.
were always there. But the question was what got the RAS in gear, and said, I got to get that from Mari-Lyn, because when I asked her what was most important to her, it's that title right there.
Right.
So that's how we deliver kindness, because kindness is, again, about moving from ego to we go. We can't know until we ask.
Right. Right. For sure. There's so many unlimited potential in all of us. And like you were saying, is the listening, the asking the right questions, or maybe just hearing somebody spout off like they're venting, right? Sometimes that person just needs somebody to listen to them so they can let it go. So as a listener, you really have to take the time and hold space for them so that they can say what they need to say, and then you can both let it go and not be attached to it, whether
Absolutely.
it's
One of the
harmful
one
or
of the
not.
cornerstones of that, and I think builds uh, into good listening, is a simple recipe for kindness and a simple recipe for a fulfilling life and
Hmm.
for impact on others. And that is to be easy to impress, but hard to offend.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
When you're easy to impress, that doesn't mean you're a pushover. And what it means is you're fascinated by people.
Right.
You're interested in what is important to them. You're interested in their talents. You're interested in their backgrounds and where they came from and how they came to be where they are right here, right now.
Hmm.
Um, when you're hard to offend, that's the tough one for most people.
Right.
You don't take things personally. And
Hmm.
it's very hard to be kind when you take things personally, because you go right into defense mechanism.
Hmm.
So here's a great internal question to ask when somebody fires, kind of hits your hot button
Yeah.
and you feel like you're being attacked. Instead, in that moment, kind of condition yourself to ask this simple question. What else could that mean? What
Hmm.
else could this mean? It could mean maybe I misunderstood them. It could be that they really had some bad news that I don't know about today.
Hmm.
It could be that they misunderstood my question.
Hmm.
And as soon as you ask that question, what else could this mean? It tempers the attack, the fighting, the getting at each other.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so being easy to impress and hard to, my grandmother was the most amazing person when it become easy to impress. She would go to a supermarket. I used to take her to a supermarket in her elder years,
Yeah.
and she would fall in love with the cantaloupe. She would fall in love with a grape. Like, did you ever see such a beautiful grapefruit? And by the time she walked out of that market, the people who scanned her food, the people in the produce department, they were like, they loved her
Right.
because she was so excited about everything around them,
Hmm.
walking by and taking everything for granted.
Right. Yeah, and how often do we do that? Take things for granted. They're always going to be here. They're always, oh, my aunt's always going to be here. I'll call her later. And then by the time you think about it, it's like, oh, I was going to call her later. And then here it is like a month later. you know?
Absolutely. You're like leading me into the perfect places, because a third is to really live with gratitude. And so here's a question for people that as we go on to the conference, I
Right.
think you're going to get a lot of great answers to this question, or great answers to build upon this question.
Right.
And who are the people in our lives who we tend to forget to thank the most?
Right.
So everybody kind of think, who are the people in our lives we tend to forget to thank the most? I've asked that in over 30 years in almost every event.
Hmm.
And immediately it hits us. It's the people we're closest to.
Right.
It's the people that deep down inside we care about the most, but sometimes we don't recognize that until it's crisis, and that's too late.
Right.
Indeed, probably the most important words I've ever written. I've written 15 books. It's funny that you brought up the potential thing, because the book before the ROI of Kindness was called There Are No Overachievers,
Oh,
which
okay.
we all have more in us than we thought. But the most important words I've ever written say this, and it's this core of kindness.
Hmm.
The love we fail to share is the only pain we live with.
Hmm.
The love we fail to share is the only pain we live with. And if we don't get that, if we don't shift into that role of CKO, the love we fail to share may well become the only pain we leave with.
Right.
That's too late.
Right.
That's too late. And so it starts by now as saying, you know, how can I help you? What can I do with you? What's important to you?
Hmm.
And by kind of getting out of that mode of defensiveness, being difficult to offend, you go a long ways towards creating connection rather than separation. Mari-Lyn, I love what you're doing with kindness. And here's another reason why it's so vital. Before coronavirus, so this was before COVID. So this
Right.
was the beginning of 2020.
Hmm.
I guess I'm
Yeah.
phasing out
It's
2020.
okay. That's old
Before,
now.
before that, every year they've done Gallup does a study of loneliness in the
Hmm.
United States. Before COVID, 62% of Americans considered themselves lonely.
Hmm.
So when you're walking down the street, more than half the people around you feel lonely. And
Hmm.
imagine now after COVID, how that might have been amplified, because we don't have the access to being around people quite
Right.
as often or as comfortably or as connecting. We can't hug people right now like
Right.
we'd like to.
Yeah.
And so how can we deal with that while we're working through the health issues? Well, it starts with kindness. It starts,
Hmm.
and kindness shines through the eyes. You can
Right.
you, you can deliver kindness through a mask.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Even when you smile, people can see it in your face and,
Absolutely.
and actually feel you, not just see you, but they actually can feel it.
You're
Yeah.
absolutely right. And you can feel yourself,
Yeah.
because instantly when you smile,
Yeah.
you change. See, whenever we seek to enrich another person's experience,
Yeah.
whether that be a kind act, whether it be a smile, whether it be a question that helps somebody think more, whenever we seek to enrich another person's experience, we can't help but enrich our own,
Hmm.
because it causes us to experience that same feeling of gratitude, of interest, of caring, of kindness, of connection. So the way out of loneliness, the way out of separation and anger and animosity is what you're doing at a grassroots level, saying a grassroots level and a business level.
Right.
Because if we can do this in our businesses, if we can do this um, as each of us saying, I hereby today promote myself into the role of CKO, we can start to change these things. We
Right.
can start to listen to one another. We can start to get along.
Yeah. And that's really the lead in to the ROI of kindness, really. you know,
Absolutely. No, it's
because
pretty funny. A lot of people don't know what ROI is. So
oh,
let's
really?
just clarify that.
Okay.
It always surprised me because my book is called ROI Kindness. I thought it was a cool title.
Yeah.
Uh, ROI means return on investment.
Right.
Most people know that, but return on investment. So every time you invest in an act of kindness, a kind thought,
Right.
you will see an amplified return.
Right.
And this is not just nice stuff. This
Right.
is hardcore, clear, factual study information that
Right.
says if your organization demonstrates kindness, you have a great level of opportunity above those that don't. And
Right.
you will do better. You'll be more consistent. You'll have better customer relations. You'll have better teamwork. You'll have more loyalty. All of that
Oh, yeah.
is
Absolutely.
absolutely covered. In the book, I go through several of those companies that absolutely soar in their industry.
Right.
Uh,
We should do volume 2 together because I've got so many stories of so much success that people have done and have achieved. It's on the website, I think, as just, people saying, "Oh my God, I implemented kindness," and then people would say back to me, even the employees would come to me, "What are you doing to our boss?" And I says, "I'm not doing anything to your boss." This is when I was doing the conferences live,
awesome.
and but now I'm doing it virtually, obviously, because we can't do any live events right now. But it was like, I'm not doing anything. Why? Just, well, he's being strange. And I said, well, strange in what way? Like, and
Good strange.
just not him, and well, enjoy it, like, notice
That is
that,
so great.
you know, so it's so cool. Yeah.
Absolutely. I mentioned before that kind of my mentor, the man who wrote the foreword to my very first book, John Wooden.
Right.
Some of the people will know who he was. If you don't know, John Wooden was the greatest college basketball coach of all time. He was a legend. He was at
Right.
UCLA, um, twice as many national championships as any other coach. But he was also the kindest person I ever met. And one
Mm-hmm.
of the things I love about John Wooden was that fact, was the example. Because again, in a world of coaching, it's very competitive.
Right.
Um, People think, well, you got to be tough. You
Yeah.
got to be mean. You got to be rough. No, John Wooden was a gentleman. About the foulest words he ever said were "goodness gracious."
Yeah.
He was strong, but in a very kind way,
Mm-hmm.
and that kindness, the fact that the greatest of all time, the best there ever was in his field, was also the kindest person you could ever have in that role, really speaks volumes to me that this works. It
Right.
works on whatever field you're in.
Mm-hmm.
It works wherever you are, to look to what you have in common, to look how you can support, to look for the best in people.
Right.
One of the things that I talk about in the book, and we'll touch on a little bit, is something that's called the Pygmalion effect.
Mm-hmm.
And the Pygmalion effect says that our thoughts, our beliefs, and our expectations are magnetic.
Mm-hmm.
That as we look at people, we're pulling them in the direction. The way we see them is actually moving them in the direction of the way we see them. So if we see their possibilities, we're helping them move towards their possibilities. If
Right.
we see their weaknesses and that's all we focus on, what you focus on is what you create, we move more towards that. So kindness requires being somewhat of a positive Pygmalion who looks for people's strengths,
Mm-hmm.
who looks for, it doesn't feel threatened by someone who's great at something. You know,
Right.
one of the things that I loved as a coach, when I was a young man and I was a United States swimming coach, I didn't want the swimmers to stop at my level. I wanted
Mm-hmm.
to be the best they could be.
Right.
And I wanted them to rise to their potential. And it
Right.
wasn't a threatening, it wasn't a limit. I wanted them to go so far beyond me, it wasn't even close. And that's the way
Right.
we should feel about our children. That's
Right.
what we feel about this world, that we can help each other move towards our own potential, because that Pygmalion effect is going to help us all rise in that direction.
Right, right, absolutely. Yeah, I'm so excited to hear your talk at the conference, and everybody else, of course, is going to be awesome. So I so enjoy our conversation right now, Brian, and I really hope we all can get that message further out into the world, the ROI, a return on investment that we make ourselves to help other people do so much better and reach their goals beyond measure, you know. So,
Absolutely. And it starts on the inside.
yeah,
All change starts on the inside and moves out. So
yeah,
some people may come from that place of it's just too much. How can we do it? We've gone so far the opposite direction.
yeah,
We start by controlling our controllables.
right.
When we try to control what we don't control, that we get frustrated, scared, frightened, that
Hmm.
fear overpowers faith.
Right.
But when we control our own controllables,
Hmm.
we can't make anyone else kind.
No.
Being a professional motivational speaker over the years, many people have come up to me and said things like, "Oh, you changed my life," and I always smile at them and I always honor them and I go, "Thank you, but you changed your life."
Yeah.
I'm a motivated speaker.
Right.
Motivation is internal. And that's a wonderful thing because we can make new choices starting a new year, a new you. That really means if we want to create some new positive movement in our life, it starts by making a few new choices.
Mm-hmm.
If you do what you've always done, you're going to get what you've always gotten. So,
Right.
and that's exciting because that means we can control our controllables through our choices and move in a direction that becomes that example. And because of the Pygmalion effect, it will affect others. But
Right.
we don't force that or try that. We start by making our own choices.
Right.
And that's what I love about what's going to be coming up in this conference is with the variety of speakers that you have, each with a different perspective of something that relates to the power of kindness, the ROI of kindness, how to generate it. There'll be something for everyone. There'll be
Right.
something where, oh, that is that you're speaking just to me.
Right. I
And
just
that's the
heard that.
exciting thing. Yeah.
I think that all this conversation, the question about what's important to you, what you just shared in our conversation, like, oh, I'm going to use that now as my question. Like I'm always asking questions, but I think I'm going to try that one out for helping me talk to people that I connect with on LinkedIn and other places like that, because it helps them like helps people really take a look at, oh, she really cares, she's asking about me. And so often everybody's asking, oh, do you need this, do you need that? No. Like,
Exactly.
you
And
know.
when you ask that question, as you said, when you ask somebody what they think or what's important to them, how does that immediately make that person feel? Valued, important, that what they say has some importance to you, that they count. And
Right.
ultimately, that's what kindness does. Kindness helps people to know that they're important,
Mm-hmm.
to know that they matter, to know that they're not just here and passing through, but that they actually are important. When we help people know they're important,
Right.
they rise closer to that potential. And that's at the foundation of being a CKO, Chief Kindness Officer. That's at the foundation of all real kindness. And
Right.
I'll tell the secret behind that secret when we're in the
Yeah, the
actual event.
conference.
Can't spill all
Yeah,
the beans.
don't give it all away all one shot. Okay, great. Any final words you want to say, Brian, before we close off the call, or?
Just first again, thank you. Thank you for
Mhm.
being someone who is controlling your controllables and reaching out and helping other people to become more alert and aware. At the core of everything I teach is a simple truth. That is, what we focus on is what we create.
Right.
And so just by shining that light on kindness,
Mm-hmm.
we direct our attention towards creating more kindness.
Right.
And so I'm just hoping that everyone, the way this works is grassroots. Each person telling a few other people, you got to go on this conference.
Yeah.
It's really going to be powerful. It'll help you in your family. It'll
Mm-hmm.
help you in your professional life. It'll even help your health,
Right.
because one of the things we learn about kind people are healthier.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yep.
Yeah. Because what happens is you start your frequency begins to rise as you move through the higher emotions like gratitude,
Right.
love, appreciation, empathy. Those overpower the negative emotions. That's why with an attitude of gratitude, there is no room for fear, anger, and doubt.
Right.
So
Yeah.
I'm just excited to be a small part of that event. And
Yeah.
as you can tell, I have a lot of enthusiasm for this, and I believe that it can make a difference. And
Mm-hmm.
one by one, that's how we can turn this world back to a more kind place
Yeah.
once again.
How we'll flip people one by one.
That's it. That's it.
Get them to be the chief happiness officer that they already are, but maybe they've forgotten about it, or maybe they don't know how. But we can all show them how it works. And
Inch by inch, anything's a cinch. Let's make it
yeah,
happen.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Brian, for joining me on the call today. And thank you, everybody who's perhaps listened to this now and maybe are listening to it later. But we all encourage you to take a look at what the conference is about and come enjoy the speakers like Brian. You know, I've certainly enjoyed him, and I've already learned many things already.
Happy
So
New Year, everybody.
happy
Thank
New
you,
Year,
Mari-Lyn.
everybody, and thank you. We'll talk to you all later. Have
Bye
an
bye.
awesome day and be kind to